of our most common features. We won't cover all of them. And during these features, we ask you to ask questions. Ask as many general questions as you have, in particular about the features. The second section of our webinar tonight, we'll talk more about the service and some special offers we have for you. But we will pause at the end, after the features, at the end of the first section, and answer your questions. So please, in the format of chat, if you would send us your questions. And again, send them to everybody so that everybody can see what's already been asked. And I'm sure it'll spur some new thoughts and ideas and questions. So feel free to ask as many questions as you'd like, and we'll do our best to get as many answers as possible. As mentioned, everybody is muted, so we do not hear the distractions in the background. And we'll go ahead and introduce ourselves now. I'm Jeff Leach, and I'm co-presenting with Dan Dickerson. We are both working for SiriusXM Marine out of the D.C. office, Washington, D.C. And we're really pleased to have Nate Weinbaum on the call as well. Nate is a Navico Pro Angler fishing guide out of the Keys. And hopefully we'll figure out a way for Nate to chime in with some comments here if he can figure out how to unmute. But without further ado, thanks everybody for joining us, and let's go ahead and get started. Dan, next screen if you don't mind, please. Okay, so what makes SiriusXM Weather different? What are our value points, so to speak? This is up-to-date graphical weather information or forecasts viewed directly on your chart plotter screen, exactly where you are at the helm, overlooking your chart plotter. You see weather on your same navigation screen, not dependent. You don't need to pick up a cell phone or have a tablet to look at this. It's displayed directly on your chart plotter. We offer complete coverage, so this is a satellite-based service. It is not limited to the range of cellular networks. So Dan and I are located here on the Chesapeake Bay, and even where my boat is kept at my dock, I only get 1.5 bars to 2 bars of cellular signal. And while I have probably 7 different weather apps on my cell phone, on my iPhone, I have horrible cell reception, more or less in my backyard. What I'm sure most of you will find that if you only have about 1.5 bars to 2 bars of cell signal, your weather screen on your cell phone does not animate. So it renders it more or less useless. And for those of you on the call that go offshore on a regular basis or at all, you recognize that usually somewhere between 4 and 6 miles, depending how close the closest cellular tower is, you start losing cell coverage. So we're not dependent on cellular service. This is a satellite network. We will talk about the coverage area in some upcoming slides. And then last but not least, one thing that we have not messaged so well that everybody really needs to know about is our seasonal suspend program. This is the option to suspend your subscription at no cost for up to 6 months at a time. There's a decent amount of our current subscribers that live in the northern latitudes and do not use their service during the winter months, and or even if you're in the southern latitudes and your boat is up on the hard getting a bottom paint or service, or you're simply not using it, there's no point in paying for a subscription-based service if you're not using it. So please feel free to use our seasonal suspend program. You simply call into our Marine Support Department and you tell them you want to suspend your service. And at that point, you give them a date you want it turned back on, your system woken back up. And you will incur no fees during the time you are in seasonal suspend. And more importantly, you won't have a reactivation fee. In the recent past, a lot of people have deactivated in the wintertime and then reactivated in the spring. And if you do that, you have to go through the process of signing back up, and you have to pay a reactivation fee. So it's something that we prefer that you do not have to incur. So we encourage seasonal suspend, and hopefully people will use it as needed. All right, next slide. Okay, so we're going to run you through some of the basic features of SiriusXM Weather. And first, we wanted to show you the path to getting there. So if you're looking at your Simrad display, and that's what we're looking at right now, from the top 3 bars, Dan, if you wouldn't mind using your cursor here, yeah, perfect. There's a drop-down menu right there. So if you click on that drop-down menu, it'll take you over to this sub-menu to the right. At that point, you want to go down to Weather Options, at the very bottom. And from Weather Options, it'll take you to this other sub-menu. Then you want to click on View. All right, and so we'll go to the next screenshot. Our most common and probably most popular weather feature, of course, is weather radar and lightning. And this is probably very familiar to most of you as you see this on your TV on a regular basis or on your cell phone apps. So this is weather radar and lightning as it is displayed over your chart plotter. On the right-hand drop-down menu, you would pick precipitation. If you can see the checkbox, that's the way that the Navico displays are laid out. And this applies to all the Navico products. So right here, we're looking at a boat in the water, and that's, where your boat is positioned, and you can see the storms coming your direction, and you see lightning cells within the storms. So what is useful here, and what we've heard a lot, in particular in the Florida area and in summer storms in different geographic regions around the United States, is very frequently you have storm cells pop up that are not full storm systems or fronts, but are storm cells. And this is a perfect opportunity for you to keep yourself in the know and aware of where those storm cells are. And if it is a full system, what we recommend that you do is zoom out. So most people that are using this right now, or a lot of people that we speak to, kind of zoom out to a wider view of the weather radar so that they have an understanding of what the weather is all the way around them, several hundred miles around, and then zoom in specifically to see the storm cells around them. In this particular case, you can see the boat, and Dan, if you use your cursor here, the boat is heading through two storm cells. And we have heard more than once that boats use this. Our users, SiriusXM Weather subscribers, actually use this to skirt around storms as needed, or at least not hit the heaviest part of storms if you can avoid it. Dan, what did I miss here?
I think that's it. We'll cover a few other items as we get further along in the seminar.
Okay. Jeff, Dan, are you guys able to pick me up?
Yeah, welcome, Nate.
Hey.
Welcome.
Better late than never. So I apologize, and I've been up since 4 in the morning, so if I don't speak as eloquently as you've done thus far. But I am that technologically inept person that works for Navico and uses this product, and even I can do it. And these storm systems in this month, particularly in South Florida and the Everglades, it's kind of a matrix and a maze of islands that block your view, and land heats up and storms move in and things get serious really quickly. So the transition of fishing for myself, where I was always that person that stayed on spot too long and ran from lightning and or jumped in the water to swim away from my boat and hide on a flat because I thought certainly I'd be struck by lightning. Transitioning into becoming a fishing guide, you think more about obviously the people's lives that have entrusted them to you to take them fishing for a day, and with families and so on. So I use this weather starting this month almost every day. So I have two 12-inch displays, and I know that's kind of a luxury, but I'm able to, of course, I make a plan in the morning and I look at the weather, but when it changes so rapidly, these storms, every day I change my routes and my avenues through inlets, outlets. There's only so many ways to navigate through our backcountry. And sometimes I have a plan and I have to go 10 miles to the north. And I know that roughly by looking at my Sirius, I can fish for 30 minutes here, allow a storm cell to go through, and then safely move into the areas that I'd like to fish and plan to fish. It's incredibly invaluable. There's so many captains that don't have this, and they cancel trips just based on 60 to 80% chance of rain, and today was a perfect example. I didn't, because I see it real time. So I live by it. It's incredibly important. It's so much more important even than traditional radar, because when you have islands blocking you, you can't really judge and truly meter whether there's lightning, and at first I was slightly skeptical. I'm like, well, I don't really trust that. So I see the lightning indicators, I look, I see lightning. So I've come to live by it. And this is probably the most profound thing I'll interject in the whole thing. But I truly love it. It works really, really well in the ways that you've just described.
Okay, thanks for that. So next thing we would like to talk about is storm attributes. This is another feature that Navico does. Not all the chart plotter brands have this feature. And basically embedded in our data feed, in addition to the storm information and the lightning information, we're able to detect higher concentrated storm cells within a large storm. So what we're looking at here is the same picture as this right here, but these are individual cells that are actually embedded within that large storm system. And you can see over here, for example, they're starting to break out and head different directions. So if you're trying to avoid the worst part of a storm, this is a nice feature to be able to look at and go, okay, you know, these are all going this way, so I need to duck around behind if I need to get it back a certain direction. So the other advantage of these attributes is you can actually click on the symbol itself, and it will bring up an additional information display, which will tell you the height of the tops of the clouds within that cell. And the higher the top, the more severe it is. And it'll also give you a digital speed that cell is moving and the direction that storm is moving. It'll tell you it's headed east, south, east, or in this case, it's headed west, that kind of thing. So this is a nice feature to give you even more information about a storm. And from there, we like to talk about wind and wave conditions, another feature that's on the feed. And with this enabled, we have lots of information that's showing up on screen. We turned off the storm information for the moment, and what we're seeing here are wind barbs. This is telling us, this symbol that looks sort of like a sideways F right here is telling us that the wind is coming out of the almost out of the due east, running from east to west based on the way this symbol looks. And so we know the direction, and then we know the speed from these other small tits that are on the end. This shorter one signifies 5 knots, and the longer one signifies 10 knots. So the combined two, we have winds out of the east at 15 knots based on this symbol. Over here, we have winds out of the east-southeast at 10 knots. So the way I'm showing direction is, think of the circle right here on the bottom of these barbs as a fixed point, and the longer shaft portion of the symbol points into the wind. So we say winds are coming from the east, and if you've listened to NOAA weather forecasts, they always tell you where the winds are coming from, meaning if you'd be facing that direction, the wind would be hitting you in the face. So that's the wind barb information. And then next we have an arrow. The arrow is the wave information. So we can see we've got winds out of the east, but the waves are coming from the east-northeast. So there's something there causing the wave not to run with the wind. We've got either some current there or some tide action. Something is creating a situation where the wind and wave are not running the same, and what that means is you're going to get chop. And depending on how far out of alignment those two symbols are, the rougher it's going to be. The next thing that we have here is the number that is hovering between these two symbols, and that is the wave period. So these waves are 11 seconds apart. They're nice long rollers and nothing really to be concerned about. It's those lower numbers you want to be concerned about. And then the next piece of information that's on this screen is designated by the color of the water. This water color represents the wave height. And so typically the rule of thumb on the color for wave height is dark blue is 1 foot or less, which is why you can see along the shore it's gone to dark blue. And then it goes from dark blue to light to green to yellow and on up to red. And depending on what you have, how you have the scale set, the range will vary, but basically you can tell right here, for instance, we've probably got about 7-footers at 11-second intervals. That's how we would determine that information. And over here, these might be 9-footers at 11-second intervals. And you can see the cursor is right here on the screen, and right over here is telling us the wave height. You can put the cursor anywhere on screen, and it will give you the wave height. So you don't necessarily have to remember what those colors mean. They're just more of an indicator to show you through a color where they're higher and where they're lower. And that's an adjustable scale, which I'll show you in a moment. So the next feature that we like to talk about is the animation feature. We've talked about storm information, like you can see on the screen here, and we've talked about wind and wave. Well, both of those features, you have the ability to look at different information. The storm information, not only can you see the current conditions, but you can click on the animation feature down here, and then you can bring up a scale and actually see, even as far back as 3 hours, what this storm has been doing. And then you can set the speed at lower, medium, or high, whatever you choose, and it's going to play basically a loop for you of what that storm has been doing. So you can see if this storm, like we see these cells are moving, so you would see not only the cells moving, but the green and the orange and yellow would be moving in, more than likely in the same direction. So you can tell if this storm is coming towards you or if it's getting away from you, if there's a way to get around it. That's the beauty of that animation feature. So you can set it to play a loop of what it's been doing. And then when we look at the wind and wave feature like we see here, not only do we give you current wind and wave conditions, but through the animation feature with wind and wave, you can look ahead at what is going to be, the weather conditions are going to be like. So these wind symbols, if I would click on 3 hours ahead over here, this symbol would move, showing me possibly a different direction and a different speed, depending on what's predicted to be happening 3 hours from now, 6 hours, 9 hours from now. And that information is forecast out as far as 48 hours with our highest tier of service. So next is sea surface temperature. This is one of probably our second most favorite feature behind the storm information, and the one that we get most compliments about. Basically, we're able to gather information from an infrared satellite that passes over the Earth and relays sea surface temperature, and we're able to overlay that onto your chart plotting screen. So what we're looking at here is this color that we see out here no longer represents wave height. We've turned the wave height, the wave information off over here, and we've turned sea surface temperature on. And so now this color palette is representing the water temperature. And over here on this side, we have a scale showing us what those colors mean. So the red to orange, I'm at 70 degree water, and the lighter blue up here, I'm at 50 degree water. And incidentally, this screenshot was just taken a few days ago. So you can see another thing, a nice thing about sea surface temperature, that's the Gulf Stream right there. So you can see where that current is happening. Those of you down in Florida that are crossing over to the Bahamas, perhaps you're not a fisherman or you're a sailboat moving much slower, affected by currents. It's kind of nice to bring this up and see where that Gulf Stream current is going to be. Now, for the fishermen, what we like to do is we like to find what we call the temp break. That's the area where the temperature is changing, like right along here where the boat position is. If I was going out looking for pelagics, I'd be working one of these edges where the color change is occurring. That's my temp break. That change in temperature causes a motion in the water and stirs up the plankton, and which brings in the bait fish, which brings in our game fish. So being able to get to an area where there's a temp break and knowing where to run even before you leave the dock is really a big plus.
Jeff, I would add that years back, these were things that only were commercial subscriptions that only commercial boats had access to, and it's pretty incredible that we have access to them thanks to the service.
Thank you, sir. So there's an even more sophisticated layer to this sea surface temperature that I like to talk about. And here what I've done is I've given you an example of not only sea surface temperature is turned on, but I've left the storm information turned on at the same time. So you can be running along this temp break and watching this big storm over here, and that storm is over the horizon more than likely. But you'll be able to see it on screen, so you'll know when it's time to cut and run. So we're looking at storm information, we're looking at our sea surface temperature, but if you're looking for a specific fish, say we want a tuna, and he likes 72 degree water, you can actually go over here and adjust the color palette. So you can dial in a specific temperature range, and then anything outside of that range, the color would just show up as gray. So you can literally find just the spot you want where that break is occurring and get to that spot. And then also you'll see down here this scale that says wave. That's for adjusting the wave height scale. You know, if you don't care about waves that are over 10 feet or even over 5 feet, you can set that scale so it shows you that range, and then anything outside that range would be, you know, hey, that's red, you don't want to go there, type of thing. And keep in mind, this is not only what you can look at current conditions, but you can look ahead as well using the forecast feature. So next, we'd like to talk a little bit about the buoy station information. Many of the buoys and seaman stations along the waterways and in the waterways have sensors on board that are reporting weather information back to NOAA. Well, we have a way of capturing that information, getting it from NOAA, and providing it to you through the SiriusXM receiver. So basically, when you turn on observations in your menu, then you're going to get all these little symbols show up on screen, and you can click on one of those symbols, and it's going to give you a brief synopsis of what's going on, what that temp sensor is picking up. And then you can actually click on the balloon that pops up, and it'll give you even more detailed information about that information, in addition, including the date that it broadcast, and not date, but time that it broadcast that information. These sensors are on timers, so they don't continuously broadcast to save energy. They'll do a burst, say, might be every 10 minutes, every 15 minutes. Different sensors have different time ratios. You'll be able to see right there when that information came in, which is really beneficial. This is not forecast. You know, that's basically real time. You can say, okay, 15 minutes ago, the waves out there were 7 footers. I don't want to go out there. Or the wind's, you know, blowing 20 knots out there. And you might be able to punch around to a couple of these, you know, a different buoy somewhere and find more ideal conditions for your boating or for your whatever you're fishing, what you're doing out there that day. So it's a really nice feature.
All right. So before I go into marine zone forecast, I just wanted to point out that it looks like some good questions are coming through, and I would encourage anybody on the call, if you have questions, to go ahead and chat us to everyone with your specific questions, specifically as they relate to these slides. Nate, was there anything else to interject before I move forward into marine zone forecast, or are you good?
Jeff, I'm pretty in line with everything you've said. I think everything is spot on, and yeah, looking forward to questions.
Great. Okay. I will also point out to everybody on the call that Dan and I refer to this webinar as our kind of 101, if you will. We're giving some of the basics and showing you how to access some of these screens, but by no means is this a very in-depth or thorough overview of all the features and how to access them. So we have considered doing a quote-unquote 200 level for people that want to dial it in even further, and we are working on videos that, you know, help the general public understand that. So we will send a survey out to everybody following this webinar, and if you do request more details or want to see more details or that quote-unquote 200 level course, please let us know in that survey. All right, so let's talk about marine zone forecast. Probably not one of the most common features that people are aware of. I think it's an incredibly useful service of ours, and it's often overlooked. So most of us, if you've been boating for a while, or even if you haven't been boating for a while, you've heard of the VHF weather reports. You turn on your VHF radio, you tune to the weather channel, and you hear these very garbled kind of mechanical overviews of the marine zones. Well, if you're anything like me, you get distracted when your marine zone comes up because it's playing in a big loop, right? Your marine zone comes up that you're concerned about, you get distracted, and all of a sudden you have to wait for the entire loop to feed its way all the way through back to your zone. We've simplified that process. And so what you're looking at is about a bunch of outlined zones. And Dan, if you can take the cursor and just kind of point to some of the different zones. These are the various NOAA zones. And this is helpful in that if you are in your boat, and in this case the icon is in the Miami area, and let's say you're going around the Keys and you're going up to Naples or somewhere in the Thousand Islands, or maybe up to Sanibel or the Dry Tortugas, or you're taking a cruise for the day, or maybe you're going fishing for the day. You want to click on one of those zones that's on that other side of Florida, the Gulf Coast side of Florida, to see what's going on over there. It is quite common for a zone that is on the other side of Florida, or even a couple zones away from where you are, depending on where you are geographically, to be significantly different from where you are. So in this particular case, you click on the zone, and Dan's pointing the cursor on the highlighted zone, which is what happens when you click on it. And then the next screen pops up a full forecast for that entire zone. These forecasts can be multiple pages long. You can read them at your leisure, and they'll give you a tremendous amount of useful information that you can use to plan accordingly.
So here I'd like to talk a little bit about some questions that typically pop up by about this time in the webinar. Typically we get asked about update rates and times. We've talked about how nice this storm information is and to get it. And our weather data updates at different rates. The lightning and storm information we feel is the most critical, and we update that as frequently as possible. Radar updates every 5 minutes. Lightning information updates every 2.5 minutes. Wind and wave information, the reporting is not as good. The sensors, again, because of how we're gathering the information. So the wind and wave information only updates every 20 minutes, and that's the current wind and wave condition information. Actually, the forecast wind and wave information is even longer. For instance, a 48-hour forecast, we feel that's you don't need to know that instantaneously, so we update that information every 30 minutes. So to give you an idea, or 20 minutes on the current conditions, and then every hour on the 48-hour. Every hour on the 48-hour forecast. So different pieces of information. We're staggering the data. That way we can get as much data in the pipe to you as possible. The one that has probably the most confusion is sea surface temperature. I mentioned there's a satellite pass, and that's not our satellite. That's an infrared satellite that is getting sea surface temperature information. Well, that satellite only makes a pass over given areas every 6 hours. So, and then it stitches together all the different regions where it takes that information from. So the area that you're in, the most up-to-date data could be as much as 6 hours old. But because, say, the satellite makes a pass at 6 in the morning, if you're taking the boat out at 9, we don't want you to have to wait 3 hours until noon for the next pass to get the data. So what we do is, whatever the most current data we have is, we rebroadcast that every 60 minutes. So you're never waiting longer than 59 minutes to get sea surface temperature. And those temperatures don't change that drastically anyway. So this is the kind of the best mix that we found that works based on the situation that exists. So sea surface temperature, it updates every 6 hours, but we refresh the information as to whatever is most current for all areas every 60 minutes. Now, all of this data comes from different sources. I mentioned the one satellite pass, and then lightning comes from a different company, and then you've got your radar, which is National Weather Service, NEXRAD radar. So we have partnered with the folks at the TWC, that's the weather company, which is the Weather Channel folks. We've partnered with them, and they they take all of the weather data and amalgamate it for us. And for instance, the radar imagery, they actually look at that data and clean it up, because it does tend to have a lot of ghost images and that type of thing. So it's cleaned, and basically the accuracy is improved, and then we put it on the feed. So it goes out to receivers. So that's where how the data and where it's coming from. Next, I'd like to talk a little bit about coverage area. Our satellites are geostationary satellites, and that's basically a hybrid of geosynchronous. And what that means is the satellite is stationed over the equator, and it matches the rotation of the Earth. So the satellite is basically hovering over North America at all times. As the Earth spins, the satellite spins in a synchronous orbit with it over the equator. So that results in a satellite footprint that you see here. This is the extent of our satellite coverage. So anywhere in this blue shaded area is where you'll be able to receive SiriusXM Weather and SiriusXM Music. So it works all throughout the United States, contiguous United States. It works all throughout the Bahamas. You lose signal a little shy of Turks and Caicos, doesn't work in Turks, and doesn't work in the Caribbean. It only works throughout the Bahamas and the Gulf. It does work in the Sea of Cortez for anybody over on the West Coast. I often talk to cruisers coming down from, say, San Diego. The signal will drop out when you're heading around the tip at Cabo San Lucas, and then you can pick the signal up again, and it'll start working again when you get up into the Sea of Cortez. And it works as far north as about Juneau, Alaska. I do get some reports of signal working outside of these areas, but we can't guarantee service outside those areas. There are some flukes, and some receivers might be a little bit more receptive, and it gets into antenna installation and that kind of thing. But basically, inside this blue footprint, and that's up to about 150, 200 miles offshore, most of the U.S., you're going to be able to get coverage all throughout the Canadian Maritimes, and in the Great Lakes, we have excellent coverage all throughout the Great Lakes as well.
Okay, so here's where we're going to pause and answer some questions, and I see that some came through. It appears that there are a few Garmin folks on the call. And Dan, you want to take the one that Brenda just texted you regarding animation and changing sea surface temp? Temperature?
Yep. I saw those and had to chuckle. So the Garmin right now has a software glitch. They're not doing storm attributes. As far as sea surface temperature, you can adjust the colors. If you have the latest software version on your Garmin plotters, you can adjust colors on the sea surface temperature. You cannot adjust colors on wave heights. Also, the looping feature, the radar feature that you see on the that we talked about, the Garmin does not have the ability to go back 3 hours. They have a set loop. It's 20 minutes. That's all they'll show you is 20 minutes. You can turn the loop off or on, and that's it. So it's not quite as customizable as with the Navico plotters.
Let's go back to, Dan, I know we got a common question about pixelation, and there's definitely a discernible difference between, some of the radar overlays on various manufacturers' plotters. So tell us a little bit about the pixelation of the weather radar, if you would, and why the image kind of appears a little bit pixelated versus what you see on maybe on your cell phone or on the TV weather report.
Right. It's not going to look as good as it does on an iPad or on TV because of the resolution. Number one, iPads, for example, have really nice high resolution, very tight knit screens. But more importantly, when you're getting data off the internet, that's a wide open pipe. You can put practically as much data down that as there is in existence. When you're out on the boat receiving a signal from a satellite, the Navico receiver satellite receiver antenna is only 3 inches in diameter. That's a very small antenna. We're sending a very small concentrated signal with a lot of information in it. Consequently, we have to lower the resolution of that information in order to be able to send you all of that down the pipe. So the image does look more pixelated than you would see if we're looking at it on the internet. The important thing here to realize, though, is although the image might be pixelated, the borders are accurate. So if you're looking at the edge of a storm coming towards you, whether it's high resolution or low resolution, that edge is pretty much in the same place. So that's the key takeaway there, is to pay attention to location of the edges of the storms. But yes, there will be some pixelation. Different brands of chart plotters, since there are some Garmin users on the call, and so different brands of chart plotters do smooth that image a little bit to make it look a little better. But honestly, the pixel is the raw data. That's the way it's coming down from the satellite. That is the accurate and best way to display it, is that image that you see right there.
Jan, while we're here, and we didn't get this specific question tonight, but I know it's always difficult to read wind barbs, and boy, myself included, it struggled and took a long time to really understand that. So can you just briefly talk about wind barbs and directions and the actuals? How do you read the speed again, if you don't mind?
Yeah, I've heard so many different ways how people talk about them look like arrows and feathers and this and that and the other, and I haven't found the best way to describe this yet, but the screen that we're looking at right now, the winds are out of the east. All these wind barbs are out of the east. I can tell because it's again, the little circle, little dot, that's a fixed point, and from there, it moves this direction. That's going into the wind, and it seems backwards to a lot of people, and I agree. It's going to be one way or the other, but basically, so that's a fixed point. It points into the wind, and then whatever number of notches is on the end designates the speed of the wind. So.
Great. Nate, anything to interject here? Any questions that you hear commonly while you're out there guiding fishing trips or from others or any other general observations that you had that you want to chime in with?
Jeff, one thing I would say is the wind indicators, and that I do get a lot of questions, like what are the blue dots? And I have two 12-inch screens, and I typically run from a station upstairs. So when I come down, people ask questions like, what are the dots? And I say a lot of them are added by myself for navigation. Others are fishing spots. What are the marks all over the screen? And the wind indicators, to me, I thought at first cluttered the screen. But when I'm making the 40-mile trip to the tip or the ultimate elbow of Florida out on the Gulf of Mexico, it's interesting to me to see what islands, when they get to be a certain size, and the elbow or the tip of Florida, what that landmass does when it heats and how it moves air. And so it's important to me to think about in terms of fishing, or if you were sailing. It's amazing to see how accurate those wind indicators are and see them swirl and change around islands and say the Cape of Florida. So I've actually come to study them and use them when those wind bars hit land. They definitely change around the specific storms, and are definitely really useful in that way.
Great. Yeah, thanks for sharing that example. That's always useful to hear how people are actually using the service. Okay. All right. So let's move forward. I don't think we got any other. Let's see. There was a question from David here that says, are there parameters in the data stream that Navico does not yet take advantage of regarding the Cape? I'm not sure I totally understand that question, Dave. Maybe if you can reframe it, we'll get to it in the second set of questions. How about that? Okay, so let's keep on moving because we definitely have some more to cover, and appreciate everybody's patience, and hope everybody is enjoying it, what we're covering so far. So the current compatible receiver is the Navico WM3 that covers the Simrad, Lowrance, and B&G brands, all under the Navico family, and it is called the WM3 receiver. Even though this is a product of Navico, of Simrad, Lowrance, and B&G, SiriusXM, because they are electronics partners of ours, we offer $100 on the rebate, even though it's not our hardware. So once you buy that hardware and install it on your boat and start signing up for sign up for our subscription service, then you can sign into SiriusXM.com/marine rebate and take advantage of our rebate offer. We will mail you a $100 Visa gift card. And I can tell you quite a few people take advantage of these because Dan and I see them on a regular basis coming through. So, yeah, feel free to take advantage of that offer if you're buying a WM3 receiver in the near future.
And I want to take this time to apologize. We did have a glitch with our rebate system last year, and some rebates got denied that were not supposed to be. So anybody that got slighted last year, if you reach out to marine.support@SiriusXM.com, let us know, and we can make that right. So, of course, we can't not have a webinar and talk to people and talk about our great service that made us great is SiriusXM Radio. All of the marine weather receivers on the market today can also receive SiriusXM Radio and can be paired to a stereo system so that you can listen to SiriusXM Radio on your boat in addition to having stellar weather capabilities. And not only can you get the weather, but you get it at a discount. When you have a weather subscription on your account, you get a discount on the music, and that's not just the music for the boat, but it also qualifies you for a discount on any other vehicle or portable receiver that you might have on the same SiriusXM account. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So here are the data packages that are available that work with the Navico brand. And for you Garmin listeners that are on the call, the Garmin units cannot pick up the marine inland package. They have not, Garmin has not opened up the compatibility for the marine inland package. Navico brands had a much larger inland and freshwater fishing market, so they were very quick to jump on the marine inland package. The marine inland package is our only package that has a geographic limitation for all of the weather services. It will only show you the weather in an 80-mile radius around your boat or around where you move the cursor. And it only works up to 10 miles off the contiguous U.S. It was designed for freshwater inland market, just like the name implies. The coastal package is not like that. There is no limitation around the boat. Like I just mentioned, it only has one geographic limitation, and that is sea surface temperature. It only displays sea surface temperature in tributary waters and up to 24 nautical miles offshore. If you're headed farther than 24 miles out, you're going to want the offshore package. If you're just a cruiser and you want weather information, you want to know the storms 200 miles out, the coastal package will get the job done very nicely. The advantage of the offshore package, as I mentioned, is the offshore sea surface temperatures, and also, for those of you that are doing extended cruising, the forecast feature that I mentioned, the wind and wave forecasts. With the coastal package, we give you current conditions for wherever we have data available, and we will give you a forecast 3 hours out, so you can see what the winds and waves are going to be doing 3 hours ahead. We figure somebody running the coast doesn't need to see that far out. With the offshore forecast is where we go out to 2 days on our forecasting capabilities. So that's the difference between these three packages. The audio packages, our standard rate for our base service is $15.99 a month. If you have a weather subscription, that drops to $10.99 a month for the audio. And then our all access package, this is our deluxe audio package that includes all of our channels. There is about 10 or 20 channels that are not on the select package, one of those being Howard Stern, another being NASCAR, and some of the other sports channels are on this more premium choice here. But more importantly than that, all access, the reason it was given that name is because it implies not only can you access the music from your radio, but you can access it via the internet. So you could be on your boat listening to music, and if you have the all access package, you also have an internet log on. Somebody could be back home with their cell phone tied to the internet listening via the SiriusXM music app. And there's no weather on internet from SiriusXM yet. We haven't set that up. But all the music, all the channels, there are actually more channels on our internet site than there are even on our satellite delivered service. It's kind of cool. Any of you that are music fans, there's even a wonderful feature. All of our music that we broadcast, or much of our music, has been archived, and you can call up. So you could call up a Jimmy Buffett concert from 2 years ago and listen to it via the SiriusXM app. Can't do that via satellite yet. But you can do it using the app. So that's the kind of the overview on our packages that we offer.
I'll also chime in, since Dan was just talking about SiriusXM Radio, and say that probably most of you have already heard that we recently acquired Pandora. And as such, even though it's only just been a couple months ago, we've already incorporated, I think, 100 channels from Pandora into SiriusXM that you can access via the All Access package, and that you will see on your cell phone via our app. So, all right. So this screen is referencing our 2-month trial offer. Hopefully, some people on the call have already taken advantage of this. If you are new to the service, we want to bring this to your attention. So please access our 2-month trial offer. This is on the coastal package. Dan was pointing out the difference between the coastal and the offshore package. The 2-month trial offer applies just to the coastal package. And we circled the 877 number down here in red, or put a red rectangle around it, for a very important reason, and that is we want to make sure that people are calling our dedicated marine and aviation customer service line. And this number goes to that specific marine customer service line. You will get somebody that understands what you were talking about. If you just simply type in SiriusXM.com and look at the general 1-800 numbers, you could be speaking to somebody that has no idea that SiriusXM even has a boating or aviation related weather service. So please call this specific number, and in this particular case, reference the 2-month trial offer as you're subscribing. You can also visit www.siriusxm.com/webinar, and there's that special offer. It's just a landing page for anybody who has joined the webinar to learn more about the service and see specifics on the 2-month trial offer. All right, as far as getting activated and getting set up, first and foremost, you need to purchase your compatible hardware, and in this case, it's the WM3, and then install it aboard your boat. We do have quite a few customers that install themselves, but if you're leery of drilling holes, for satellite cables and the satellite antenna puck, then you may want to have an electronics installer put that. It is important to note, and Dan kind of alluded to this already, that your antenna needs to have a clear view of our satellite. So you do not want to have your antenna underneath something or below decks. We've seen some applications that were very questionable and wondered why people didn't get the best signal. And some people, believe it or not, do install their SiriusXM weather receivers below decks, which is definitely far from optimal. So clear view of the sky, and hopefully your signal will be much better there. The step number 2 is choosing your subscription package, as Dan just reviewed those 3 subscription tiers. And then visit SiriusXM.com/Marine Activate if you want to activate online, or simply call to activate. And again, here's another 800 number. This number also goes directly to our Marine Service Customer Service Center.
So here I'd like to talk a little bit about the specifics of if you've just installed a unit. As we mentioned, when you call us, you have to have your radio ID number. Now, the ESN number, different manufacturers call them different things. Garmin users out there, you hear the term radio ID. The Navico users will see the term ESN used. It's the same thing. We're looking for this number that shows up. And that number can be found on the box when you buy the unit. It can be found on the underside of the antenna, but where we prefer that you get it from is from the screen of your chart plotter after you've hooked everything up. Because if it shows up on this screen, then we know it's connected properly. We also know that it's getting signal strength. And then once it's subscribed, the Navicos even have a lovely option where they tell you that it's all hooked up properly and that it should be working. So we like you to get the ESN from this screen, and this is found in the settings menu on the Simrad and Navico units. If you don't know where this screen is, you can check your manual or reach out to marine.support, and we can walk you through where that is. The next thing,
quickly, while you're on that ESN page, will you tell us about your active your system sitting dormant for a while too, and just remind people of that?
How about if I do it here?
Perfect.
So the next thing we like you to check is signal strength, because when you call us and set up a subscription, we have to send out a signal to the unit to basically wake it up. And if you're not showing a good, nice, solid 2 or 3 bars of signal strength, then sending that signal is useless. The max is 3, so it goes from 0 to 3. So, and I don't even know why they bother even mentioning 0 or 1, because it's got to have 2 to work. So that's the bottom line on signal strength. I would say maybe if you're always seeing a 2 and you install the antenna below decks, then you know why. Some signal is getting in, but not enough to work properly. So the signal strength is what we like you to look for. Another way you can check your unit to see if it's working is via the audio channel. We have channel number 1, which is live at all times. That's what we call our preview channel. Even a receiver that is not subscribed to anything will be able to pick up channel 1, and if you can hook a speaker up to your unit, even if you plug an earbud into the jack that's on the receiver, you'll be able to hear the preview channel and the voice on there saying, you know, how wonderful SiriusXM is, and please call this number to subscribe. Although we don't want you to call that number because that's an audio number, and we want you to call our Marine team so you get somebody who understands boats. Now, once you have figured out that your receiver is connected and working, I mentioned we need to send a signal to wake it up. We call that a refresh signal. And not only do you use that when the receiver is brand new out of the box, but as Jeff just asked about a moment ago, should you suspend your service for the winter? If a unit is left dormant and without power for too long, it forgets its subscription status. That's basically how it works. Or if you've requested us to suspend your service, then it no longer holds its subscription status. So when you turn it on, it just sits there and waits. Sending a refresh signal is how you wake it up and say, oh, here's your subscription. You should be showing your client the coastal package or the offshore package or whatever package is subscribed to. We refer to that as a refresh signal. So this is one of the first troubleshooting things we always suggest. If you turn your unit on and it doesn't work, then it's very easy. Send a refresh signal. We have an automated system. You can go to SiriusXM.com/refresh and type in your ESN number, or we have a phone number you can call. And the phone number you call in, you don't even necessarily need your ESN. You just need the phone number on your account that you use to access your account. You tell it your phone number, and it'll see the receivers on your account, and it'll send a refresh to all of them. If you have 2 cars and a boat, it'll send a refresh out to all of them. If there are too many, or if it does have a problem doing that, then it'll ask you for your ESN number. But basically, there are automated ways, and of course, you're always welcome to call us and ask for a refresh as well. But that's what a refresh signal is all about. That's a way to wake up your unit, or to remind your unit if it's had a glitch. Maybe there was a voltage spike or something that causes it to lose its memory, or you did a software upgrade, and that might have caused it to lose its subscription status. Sending a refresh 90% of the time will correct a unit that's acting up. So again, the numbers we've talked about, we've several numbers that have shown up throughout this webinar here. The first one was to clue in people about the 2 months free, but it went to our Marine team. And then this number here, again, is just one of our direct access numbers. You can use any one of these 3 numbers that you've seen on the screen. Gets you to our dedicated Marine team. And again, specific questions that you have, email those to tech support. The people that you talk to on the phone, their primary duty is to turn on new service and suspend services and answer billing questions. They can tell you any promotions that are going on. If you've got a how-to question, if you're really having some problems, we ask that you reach out to us by email. If you want to talk to somebody, no problem. Email us. Give us a time that would be convenient when you can be on the boat we'll have someone from tech support call you back that's familiar. When you email us, tell us what brand of equipment you've got. If you can tell us your ESN number, so much the better, so we can have that information ahead of time when we call you, and we can walk you through practically any button push or figure out what's going on with any unit. Or if you have an older unit you have questions about, this is the address to use.
All right, and so we will take some more questions. It looks like we've had a few more coming in. I'll let Dan field those, but before we get to your questions and kind of wrap up here, we did want to remind any anglers out there that we have one remaining webinar, and it's on June 3rd, and it's titled Optimizing Your Fishing Experience, and it's going to be with the host of the Florida Insider Fishing Report, Captain Rick Murphy. And we'll talk very specifically about how best to use SiriusXM Weather to optimize fishing and find fish, locate fish, possibly, and stay safe out on the water, obviously. So let's get to some questions here before we wrap things up. And Dan, you got the floor.
Okay. Someone's asking the difference between WM3, and I'm guessing it's probably WM2 or WM1. There have been different variations of receivers as electronics have progressed over the years. In some ways, they've been done to keep up with the changes in the chart plotters. And in some cases, we've updated the feed. A lot of you may know that Sirius and XM companies merged a couple of years ago. That was probably the main reason that a new receiver was put out into the market. And there's not a whole lot of difference between the receivers. The older receivers, the resolution on sea surface temperature and wind and wave isn't quite as good. And if you go too far back in time, you lose the marine zone feature because NOAA went in and renumbered all the zones, and the older chart plotters don't have the ability to update the zone numbers. So, a few limitations, but basically the content has stayed the same over the year. The package names have changed because they needed a way to differentiate between new receivers and old receivers. But basically, weather hasn't changed. We've added a few things. Like I said, resolution improved, and we're working on some more new stuff coming down the pike. We hope to talk more about that soon. We're always looking to improve our products, and if any of you have any suggestions about something that you'd like to see on the feed, I know the last webinar we gave, a person was asking for fog, and we were like, yeah, that's a good one. We need to work on that and see if we can give you, for the people up in New England area, if we can show them where the fog banks are. But we love to get feedback from our customers, and you'd be surprised at how much of that feedback is taken into consideration, seriously taken into consideration.
Great. Why don't I field a couple here, Dan, and then I'll turn it back over to you. Somebody asked about viewing it on your iPad or computer, and I think Dan may have mentioned already that this is strictly via satellite to our marine receivers and displayed over your chart plotter. So as of right now, we do not have a weather-based feature that is available via internet that can be displayed over your iPad or computer. Somebody also, I think there's a few people that probably joined late and missed my commentary about recording this session. We are, in fact, recording this session, and we will send it to everybody on this call this evening, so you can stand by and at your leisure kind of work back through the webinar recording. All right, Dan, back to you. I think there was a couple others.
Yeah, the question about the inland package. Again, the inland package, it only works up to 10 nautical miles offshore. And then once you're inshore, it only works an 80-mile radius around the boat. So it is strictly for inland users. The coastal package, not the same. It works as far offshore as we go. It just limits sea surface temps and wind wave and barometric pressure forecasts. Barometric pressure is one of the things we didn't include on this webinar that the unit can display. So that will maybe in our 200 series, or if you have questions about pressure and weather fronts, you can email us with anything. We can explain that for you.
And I think there was a question about waves, Dan. Did you see that one?
I did, and I couldn't answer it. I'm going to have to follow up with that one via email. I didn't either. I didn't understand the question, or I didn't know the answer. I apologize.
Great.
It's good to get stumped every now and then. Keeps me on my toes.
That's a good thing. By the way, Dan's being humble. He probably knows more about SiriusXM weather than anybody in the world, but and we'll definitely take an awful lot of calls and questions at shows. So appreciate that, Dan. Next slide, if you don't mind. So as a reminder, marine.support@SiriusXM.com. If you have any questions for us, we really appreciate everybody joining tonight. You will get a survey and follow-up, and we appreciate any commentary you have, any suggestions or advice you guys have. We look forward to receiving all of it. And thank you again. Have a fantastic night. Nate, thanks again for joining us. Really appreciate it.